So what's wrong with this meme? Let's talk about it. All right, so this meme says, yes, I'm an atheist, but just because I don't believe in your God does not mean that I don't believe in anything. I believe in compassion, kindness, love, logic, equality, empathy, myself, integrity, honesty, and more. Now this meme is interesting because most atheists claim that they reject God's existence because there's a lack of scientific or empirical evidence for God's existence. If we're to take this objection seriously, then we should probably reject just about all of the things in the meme because most of those things can't be proven scientifically or empirically. Think about it. Could you prove compassion, kindness, love, logic, equality, and those kinds of things by looking at science? Not to mention, if somebody thinks that you shouldn't believe in things unless you can prove them by science, well, that claim itself cannot be proved by science. And to make matters worse, science itself cannot be proven by science. And science is based off of things that cannot be proven by science, like mathematics and logic and reason and that sort of thing. Now, for an atheist to take this kind of logic, but also reject God's existence by claiming that there needs to be scientific or empirical evidence for God's existence, I hope they got a good reason for why they seem to arbitrarily reject God's existence by giving God a different set of standards than they would give these other immaterial things that they believe in. The point of this is that the things that atheists typically use to reject God's existence are the same things that if they would apply this equally towards other things besides God, it would rule those things out as well. But assuming that the atheist doesn't take this style of an objection and that they accept things that are immaterial into their worldview, now what can we say about this meme? So we can ask, is the atheist irrational for believing in these things? Or do they just know that these things exist given their experiences with the world? Now, I think it's worth noting that some atheists like Sam Harris believe that we're not just physical only beings, but that we also have an immaterial consciousness that can't be reduced to just the physical. So at this point, we can just ask something else. If there's things in this world that are immaterial and that can't be reduced to just the physical sciences, and we all believe that these things exist, does it really make more sense on an atheistic worldview, or does it make more sense to have a God in the picture where immaterial things are at the foundation of the world? So of course some people can say that these immaterial things really do exist and that atheism is still true, but by doing so, then atheism can no longer be a superior explanation for the world. And the reason why is because a world that includes God in it already has immaterial things at its foundation. So these immaterial things naturally fit into that worldview a lot easier than they would atheism. So in other words, the atheistic view only makes more sense than the spiritual view if everything is physical. Most people find a physical only world very difficult, if not flat out impossible to believe, including some atheists like Sam Harris apparently. In a physical only universe, we should conclude that we're just physical beings without souls, that when our loved ones die, they no longer exist. The joys that we experience from music and art are really just things that helped our ancestors survive. That meaning only consists of stories that we just tell ourselves, and that love and beauty are really just illusions that are caused by chemicals firing in our brains. A physical only universe also seems to entail that humans don't have free will. Think about it. If we're really just only our brain, then a chemical has to fire at the same time or before we have a thought in order for us to have that thought. So this would mean that we don't really have free will. Instead, we're slaves to whatever our chemicals in our brains do or how our brains are governed according to the laws of physics. In order for you to truly have free will, there has to be an immaterial aspect of you that can cause the chemicals in your brain to fire at least sometimes. And lastly, moral outrage doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense in a physical only universe. In the first place, if we don't have any free will, then what right do you have to get upset with other people for doing things that they were only programmed to do? So if you're going to complain about the immoral things that the religious people do, what right do you really have to get mad at them if they have no free choice in the matter? You're treating them as if you really do believe in free will. Secondly, moral outrage doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense in a physical only universe, and the reason why is because you can't point to or touch right or wrong. This is why a lot of atheists claim that morality is just an illusion. But this seems like a very difficult view to live consistently with. If you believe that morality is just an illusion and you saw someone beating and molesting a little child, it would be really difficult to tell yourself that the abuser isn't really doing something that's wrong. It only just appears so. If everything really is only physical, then there's no such thing as human rights either. They would be just another illusion that we either socially created or something that we're programmed to just believe in. But are these things like love and human rights, are these things really just an illusion? Now, several more examples could be added to the list, but I'll go ahead and just leave it at this. A world where we're just physical beings without souls, and things like free will, beauty, love, justice, morality, good and evil, and things like human rights are just illusions, doesn't seem to be the same world that we live in. If we have to assume that we live in a physical-only world in order to maintain the belief that God does not exist, then maybe it's best that we start reevaluating our assumption that we live in a physical-only world. The most honest thing to do is to try to follow the evidence where it leads and be as consistent as possible with the way that we come to believe or reject things. So, why not just adopt a view of the world that actually explains the world that we live in? By the way, for more on evidence and why some don't see evidence for the existence of God, check out my video, 3 Reasons Why Some Don't See Evidence for God. I also want to give a real quick shout out to my super Patreons, Wade Wells, Christopher Young, Chandler Johnson, Eric Hamilton, David Wood, Douglas Lupati, Wooford, Rob Wilkes, Maria V, Martin Luca, Sam Ahiron, Matthew, and Scott Roberts. You guys are the reason that I get to make videos, so thank you. So next time you meet an atheist who rejects the existence of God because he says that he only believes in things that he can prove scientifically, but at the same time he believes in things like logic apparently, and he can't prove any of those things scientifically, what are you gonna say? What do you mean?